Good morning, my name is Lorne. I'm a lecturer and an academic leader up in Auckland, one of the original founding trustees with Tan and Nigel over there and the guy who's here at the moment. And I'm a conservation biologist by trade, but I guess I've concentrated more in the previous and just recent years in the captive management and the zoo industry. So what I'm presenting here is not research, because this is really set up. This is me setting up questions and ideas for panels to think about tomorrow. So I've called it integrated conservation. I think in the blurb it would talk about bridging the gaps between in situ and ex situ, but in the zoo industry we tend to call that integrated conservation. So just some very quick facts. Bit depressing in places. So we now know that extinction rates are between 1,000 and 10,000 times background rates, which is, I'm talking about 15 years ago, I used to talk about being 100 to 1,000 times, so it's from 1,000 to 10,000, it's picked up in the last few years. Out of 85,000 species that have been looked at by the IUCN have been assessed, 24,000 of them, or thereabouts, which is 28%, are threatened. And that's only out of, which is about 5% of the total number of species that we've described so far. So these are kind of bleak findings, we know that. Fact, hundreds of thousands of animals, which represent many thousand species, are in the captive environment. Zoos, breeding facilities, private ownership, and the like around the world, like it or not. Fact, many species have been saved by that combination between the ex situ and in situ experience. Many species. And I've deliberately not put up pictures of New Zealand species, mainly because out inside New Zealand, maybe these aren't so common. You may not know those species there, but they've all been saved from extinction by the combination of in situ and ex situ work. From the European wisent or bison all the way down to this little isopod stuck on the bottom right here, which is just amazing. It was found in one vent in the sea, which is incredible. And they've actually relocated it to make sure that it's of its survival. Fact, if you just concentrate on the right-hand box, you'll see 700 million people visit affiliated zoos, accredited zoos across the world. 700 million every year. And I think that tells a story. It tells a story of what Edward Wilson talked about, which is biophilia, which is humans loving nature, we connect with nature. Unfortunately, as someone I had a great privilege of listening to only earlier this year, David Attenborough states, today more and more of us live in cities and lose any real connection with wild animals and plants. I think that's absolutely categorical. It's very, very clear in Auckland as well, in New Zealand. And that's right. And I can also corroborate this. I was born in London to a reasonably poor family, inner city London kid. The chances of me going to Africa and seeing animals in the wild and constantly getting out of the countryside were zilch. So zoos were pretty much my only connection. That's how I connected. And when you do go into zoos and you do watch these kids and seeing animals close up in environments that they've never seen in the wild, you can see it in their faces, it's categorical, they are absolutely enthralled. There's the connection, there's the engagement. Not always. It doesn't always work. I have to say, if that were me sitting in that seat, I'd be in the sun. So what is integrated conservation? Well, I'll get to that in a second, but can I just introduce WAZA, which is the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums, which is the overarching international body, global body for zoos, for accredited zoos, affiliated zoos, and it tends to link all the zoos and the regional zoo associations with the global conservation organisations like the IUCN through the SSC, the Species Survival Commission. And I want to just put this up there just to show you the commitment that zoos and the captive environments, captive industry have for conservation. The latest strategy in 2005, called Committing to Conservation, it states, as zoological professionals who care for animals as our core function, it is critical that we give highest priority to increasing our commitment to the conservation of wild populations. It is about wild populations, that's what they're concentrating on. Integrated conservation, and what I've done here really is just highlighted a few of the ways in which it can be done. This group here tends to be roles or objectives that can be done within the zoo itself. So the themed exhibits, interpretation and engagement of those exhibits, educational programs, I'm going to come back to that in a while, even raising funds to support field conservation projects. If you look outside the walls of zoos, for example, we can look at supporting research in the field, breed-to-release programs, reintroduction and translocation programs, and establishing and supporting field conservation units. And a great example is Auckland Zoo and its restoration of Rotorua Island on the Hauraki Gulf. But of course, what we're skilled at doing, what the captive wild animal industry is skilled at doing is population management, small population management. And but in order to keep a viable population, we must ensure that they're demographically stable. The populations are demographically stable. They're healthy and they can reproduce. They're distributed amongst a number of institutions to ensure that we don't lose whole populations through catastrophic stochastic loss. And we need a fair size population as well to ensure genetic diversity. It's this latter thing that tends to cause problems in the captive community. As a result of that, the latest strategy talks about something, and it's a bit small on the screen, I apologise, but I'll probably have to get a bit closer myself to these. The latest strategy talks about the one plan approach. And the definition of this is an integrated species conservation planning that considers all populations of the species, inside and outside the natural range, under all conditions of management, and engages all responsible parties and resources from the start of the conservation planning initiative. And if I just take this and blow it up, this little jigsaw puzzle, you will see it talks about connecting the zoos, government, landowners and local community, wildlife managers, other stakeholders, and the conservation organisations. And this is done on a global scale, but you can see this could be reduced down to a national scale, even to a species scale, which is where we're coming to with here. So what can integrated conservation do for here? I've listed a few of the things that I'd like to think that we start talking about. So, insurance populations, do we need one? How does that start? What do we do? How many of them do we need? How's that going to work? Breed to release has been a kind of a slightly dirty word, or dirty phrase. Are we going to do it? Why not? If not, or if so, how are we going to do it? Translocation, obviously we've done that, we've been involved in that. Vet care is ongoing. Research, of course, there's a huge amount of projects that go on in zoos, inside and outside zoos, which are funded by zoos as well. I've highlighted advocacy and education because of that slide I showed you about just how clear it is that we need to change the hearts and minds of people. And it was great to hear this from our keynote speakers earlier today, from Peter and from Lou, that it is about changing people. And zoos are in a great place to do this in collaboration with the in-situ people as well. Look at the tourism around this area, for example. Are we sending the same messages? That's my point. What are those messages? Are we sending slightly oblique messages in different ways, which confuse people? And out of that comes education in the schools. Can we get into schools and get to them to people early? It is about the kids, it's about the future. Fundraising, obviously, for our organisations, the zoos can fundraise. It's a matter of how they fundraise, and it's a matter of where they put those funds. And then, of course, the zoos can actually provide volunteer field staff as well. They're only too keen to get out and help where they can. With all due respect, when I went out to help Josh in the field, it was an experience that took me a long while to get over. I'm I'm an aggressive man by trade, but I couldn't believe you throttled Josh the first time I went up there. It's an incredible machine of a man going up those hills. And I know there's a lot of people here that do it as well. And but normal people, that's quite a challenge. I'm also in the company of. Okay, so what potential barriers exist? Well, I've listed a few that have been historic. Lack of understanding of what ex situ can do. And I understand that as well. I don't think we've been particularly brilliant at putting that forward. The new strategies are much better at saying what we can do. Different philosophies between ex situ and in situ industries. There has been this kind of near the twain shall meet sometimes. Lack of coordination of strategies to link in situ and ex situ. Obviously, if near the twain shall meet, there's not going to be a strategy which links the two together. Sharing the funding. Funding is a problem, we've already highlighted that, so it's a matter of each of us trying to take our bit, and sharing that sometimes is a bit complicated. Ownership of projects, I think there has been a little bit of protectionism, and that goes across the board. We now need to break those barriers down and start working together. We don't have much time, we've seen this. Everyone's been talking about this. It's not just for Kia, but this is where we are. And we're all somewhat unsure about where all of the animals are. We're not always sure precisely where they are in captivity. Another few just cropped up, so I got told only a few days ago, so, and far more than we thought. So we need to find out where these birds are. So this is the last slide. So what do we need to do to make this work, or what do we need to know to make this work? Well, we need to know who wants to be involved. None of this is going to work unless people actively really want to be involved. There's a lot of talk, we can all talk, it's easy to say this, and then we leave these walls, we leave this environment, and then it doesn't transcribe into actions. So who wants to be involved? What are the capabilities of those stakeholders? What can they do? Where's the experience and the skills? What are the priorities for Kia conservation? It's something we've been working on for years now, for the last 11 years, so we kind of know some of these now. Now we've got to look at how we can, what kind of strategies we can use to put those resources to best use. And how do we consult with all the stakeholders? How do we keep that communication going? That's something, again, that tends to fall out of this, which is we all gather here, it's great, we talk, we network, and then we get into busy lives. And it all falls apart. And many of these ever said, well, I didn't talk to you for the last 5 years, what's happened? And so we need to really have a good panel discussion later on. I think it's tomorrow's, and I look forward to hearing how we're going to cope with some of these questions, some of the tricky questions as well. Let's get into them, let's actually decide and make a difference now. So I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in the panel discussion.